Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily Deck podcast. My name is Susie Hart, and I am the editor. And today I am so excited to be joined by my sister, Jo Hart. Hi, Jo. How are you?
Hi, good morning. I'm good. It's been a while since our last podcast, so I'm really excited to get back to it.
Yes, it has been a minute. It's been an incredibly busy season, but we are so excited to be back to doing these podcasts and, just ranting about everything that's been going on in our life and everything that's kind of affecting the world today as well. And I'm so excited to be doing this with my sister together. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that has really impacted um, our lives and really hits close to home for both Jo and myself. We are actually talking about labels. So we're talking about how that can kind of affect us from the beginning of our lives, from as we were kids to the time we grow up, and how it kind of shapes, transforms, and impacts our growth and progress as a person. So
Yeah.
let's just dive right in, if that's okay. So I just wanted to understand from your experience, Jo, what has been your experience with labels and how have you been labeled in the past personally?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, to start off with. So I think there are some labels which I think really fueled me and really kind of defined me in a way, and they were good ones. Like, oh, she's a really great public speaker. This one has a gift for public speaking. I think, and that's not really necessarily even something I would have thought about myself or even, credited myself with. But because teachers said it, my parents said it, people in church settings said it, I think it challenged me to like do elocution competitions and debates, and like now obviously I do some preaching and things like that in church. So I think that's really something like, oh, it gave me some validation that I'm good at something. But there were other labels which were actually well intentioned, like she's an intelligent child. Okay, so now there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's definitely well intentioned. But because it was passed out so young, I felt this pressure to live up to that label, that because everybody believed it, my teachers, my headmaster, my whoever I encountered, because I had a very good memory and I could memorize things just like that, like very, very easily. I was labeled this intelligent child, but the thing is that I could memorize stuff, but it didn't necessarily translate to, mathematics and science and the typical Indian, like, where they're like really good at maths or something like that. It didn't translate to a lot of, and there's different forms of intelligence, which I didn't understand. And I don't think even that generation understood. And because I couldn't necessarily live up to that intelligent label, I was labeled as lazy because, I was trying so hard, but I wasn't matching the expectations of intelligence, if that makes sense. So I was labeled as lazy and probably like underperforming and all of that stuff. So that's something that really sticks out to me in my childhood. What
Yeah,
about you?
yeah, I can totally relate, especially with the intelligent one and stuff. Like for me personally, I mean, this isn't exactly a label. It was more like aspiration that my parents and my family had, and I know you guys all had. We were like, you are going to make it. You are going to be the one that makes a lot of money, and you're going to be the most famous writer and stuff. And this isn't exactly a label, but it was kind of a, because they knew that I could write and they knew I could do this. And so, although I loved the encouragement and I loved the fact that my family believed in me, I also felt that pressure as well. I was like, if I
Yeah.
don't make it, if I become a failing writer, if I just don't become a writer at all, if I go into something completely different, am I going to be a failure? Am I going to be labeled as a failure? If I don't make a lot of money, am I going to be a failure? So sometimes people put those things on you with the best of intentions, but sometimes it can kind of make you feel like stuck and like a little bit overwhelmed by that expectation.
Yeah.
And one of the labels I also faced as well was the intelligence one, where I always felt that I wasn't really the most intelligent person. And so I think sometimes people would say like I'm dumb or something. And that's because I have a introverted capacity where I process things internally and I process things a bit slower. And I always used to think that because I process things slower and because I'm not very fast or able to get instructions immediately or action things immediately, it meant that I myself am dumb. And so people would call me dumb, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I process things slowly, I'm dumb. Whereas people understand things, they pick up things quickly and they can just get it done. And it didn't really help that I was called like dumb or stupid sometimes. And that was, I think, the most one of the most damaging things that I have faced personally, because like that was really it was really damaging when someone attacks your intelligence. But then I remember many years ago having a conversation with my brother about this, and this was something that kind of really like changed my whole view on this point of being labeled dumb or intelligent or whatever. And I said, I was like, oh, I think the conversation was something like, oh, I think people call me dumb, and like I feel so stupid sometimes. I feel so uh, I'm not smart. And then he was like, but what is smart? And I was like,
Yeah.
what do you mean what is smart? And he's like, well, people have different levels or types of intelligence. People can be emotionally intelligent, and that's extremely intelligent. Some people can be book smart. That's also a level of intelligence. People can have general knowledge, so that's another type of intelligence. And then there's other stuff. There's IQ and there's EQ. So if I
Yeah.
look at it that way, I would say I'm like not with a way of saying it with a lot of ego, but emotionally intelligent. I think I have that, because I have empathy, I have awareness, I have a lot of emotional intelligence, but I don't have a
Yeah.
lot of general knowledge or book smartness that other people have. So does that mean I'm not intelligent? No, it doesn't mean that. It means I have my own levels of intelligence. And I think that that was something that completely changed it for me, because it was like everyone can be intelligent. It's just that they have their own ways or areas of expertise and intelligence. And that is something that can really help them understand where they're coming from. And of course, there are so many labels that have been put on me or us, or especially as Indian women, expectations, but this is just one of the things that kind of I think a lot of us struggle with being called unintelligent or stupid or dumb. And I think people don't even mean it when they say that. They just say it as a joke. Oh, you're so dumb. You're so stupid. You're so blonde. But like, you never know how much that might hurt someone, when they might actually go and say, oh, I can't do anything right because I'm so dumb. So I would just say, like, really be careful, especially when you attack someone's intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I don't know if you would agree, but it was kind of like, it was also hard for both you and me in different ways, because our brother, whom you're talking about, he was so good at school, man. Like, and it almost seemed like he didn't even have to try. He was good at sports, he was good at music for a while till his voice cracked, and that's a different story. He was, and even with studies, he would literally just sit for like 2 hours, and he would just absorb all of the information, process it, and he could go out and he could play, and he would have like A's everywhere, in his report card, like it was crazy. And you and me, we would like study through the night and like down like 10 cups of coffee, and our mother had to like literally sit with us all night and reading to us, and like, stay awake, come on, like, let's do this. And we would come home like it was really hard, like, but I think that's one of the things which also really struggle, like, oh, you're his sister, therefore you must
Yeah.
be um intelligent the same way. But no, we were really different. And I think all three of us had gifts, but they were like vastly different. Is
Yeah.
that's I mean, would you agree with that?
I definitely agree. And I used to get that a lot, the comparison to my siblings, which I think was one of the worst things I faced with my insecurities growing up, because you were labeled as a super accomplished, independent, social, Isaac was the same way, very social, very um good at his job, very good at his studies. And like how you said, like you would study and study and study. And even I would study a lot and go in tuitions and stuff and still come out with C's and D's. So that was the difficulty for me, where those kind of things also, like maybe grades also make you feel dumb, or when people unintentionally compare like I think once for a job, they were like, oh, you got this job because it's your brother. So I also felt that expectation, like, because he's so good at his job and he's so well liked by other people, I was expected to live up to that standard. And sometimes I would see it when people would treat me differently to him, and I wouldn't like be up to those same standards. But then it takes time to realize that you have your own values and skill sets, and you're not meant to be a copy and paste of your siblings or the people that you look up to, even. And it really takes time for you to actually break free from those expectations of who you're supposed to be, and just allow yourself to just be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think that's like one of the things about like being this the second and the third, and the other, like the children that comes after, the sibling that comes after, because the first one probably has a clean slate, essentially. um yeah, so I think we've talked about like intelligence and dumb, but those weren't like the only labels that we had to grow up with. So what are some of the other like really common labels that you think have been just passed out without really a second thought? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I used to face over the past couple of years is the assumption that, like, being single is being
Yeah.
incomplete. I think that's a expectation that we unfortunately have to face more than we would like to. And then
Yeah.
even when you are dating or in a relationship or engaged, even, then it's like you're not married, so you're not getting there. And then
Yeah.
when you're married, you're like, you don't have kids yet. So I just think the expectations, like, relationally in our lives are just so, like, suffocating for me personally. Like, it's just very um it's just something that really can make someone feel very upset and just incomplete when they're just always asked, like, oh, how come you don't have someone? And, oh, you're still single. Like, sometimes people say single in that negative um connotation, like, yeah, yeah, you're single, you're still single and stuff like that. And they obviously might mean it as a joke, but I think those are some things that just commonly get passed around. And you never know, someone might be in a season of really struggling with their singleness. I know, like, when I was single, I really struggled with it. And then when people say, oh, you're still single, you still haven't found someone, and I'm like, but you're so, and then they would say things like, but you're so pretty and you're so funny and you're so smart, so how come you're still single? I'm like, I don't know. You should ask the guys that. And I don't know why I'm
Your
still
eyes, guys.
because the thing is, you might be an amazing person, and but just because you haven't found the person yet, that doesn't take away from how amazing you are as a person,
Exactly.
and how complete you are. And I obviously think, like, other things that people would say, like, especially in Indian culture, like how I was saying, they would label you as, like, too fat or too skinny. Like, for me, for example, I've recently lost a considerable amount of weight, but people mean well, but they keep coming up to me saying, you've lost so much weight, you look so good now. And I'm like, why does that mean that I didn't look good before? Because I know I looked good before. I'm like, you look so good, you lost so much weight. And I get this comment so often. And people
Yeah.
just love to comment on a girl's weight, like, as though that's the most exciting thing about a woman. Like, it's so annoying. So that's my experience with these labels. Yeah, what's
Yeah.
your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can relate with the too fat, too skinny, too short, label as well. Like, like, oh, you're so cute because you're short and chubby. I'm like, well, thank you, and then the moment you go and lose weight, like, you look so nice now. Like, look at your face. I can see your cheekbones, don't put on weight anymore. Like, just stay at this weight. And then I like at one point I became really sick when I was in like my mid-teens and stuff, and I became really, really skinny at that point of time. And they were like, "Man, you look so much nicer when you had some flesh on you." And I was like, "Yes, I chose to be so sick that I'm like almost anorexic because this is my choice." And it's like, anyway, so let's just not get into that because it's a topic of its own. But like I think some of the other labels which have just been passed on without thinking is, um and again, it's not necessarily a negative word, but like being labeled an extrovert. Um, because listen, I do like people. I don't dislike them. I do like people. I was a very social person. I was a very I am still a very high functioning person. I can function, having people around a lot of the times, but I don't think that I necessarily fit into a complete extrovert because I do really need a lot of downtime. And I need a lot of like a lot more me time than people expect. And I think because at that point of time I was driving, I had my car, and that my car was my sanctuary. And so that was enough for me to like recharge in order to be uh with all of this socializing and stuff like that. But I'm not an introvert either, wherein like, because I need people, I do need people. So like I'm somewhere in the middle is what I would say. So I mean, that's one of the things I really struggle with. They're like, oh, but you're an extrovert and you should be like this, and you're a public speaker, and you're, this, and like they expect me to be this dynamic, charismatic, um out there person, but which I'm really not. Like I have fears, I have insecurities, and um all of that, and it's not so easy for me to just be like out there all the time. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can kind of understand and relate to, I mean, with the whole like introverted thing, there are some an extrovert thing. There's a lot of expectations, like you say, that come along with that character. Like for example, I can relate in one sense where they say that introverts are like people who are very quiet but intelligent. So when they speak, they say something profound. I'm like, you know what? When I speak, I don't really say something profound.
When you
So
speak, I'll probably be like, huh?
yeah, honestly, I don't even know, like, because I don't even know how to communicate sometimes. Like, I don't know. Like, for example, like, again, to bring up this example, and I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, but um, my brother's a great preacher, amazing, super, like, very on point, very direct and stuff. And I myself am a youth leader, which means occasionally I have to preach sometimes. And because I'm someone who's like an internal process and a writer, so I communicate better on paper. So when I preach, it's not as clear or as communicative, and it doesn't always get to the point the way Isaac can, my brother. And it's not like an insecurity thing also, because it's something that's also been pointed out to me, like by one of my youth team. It's like they were like, oh, you sometimes I notice you kind of struggle to get to the point a little bit, and you struggle to explain yourself and stuff. I'm like, yeah, because I know what I want to say, but I can't communicate it clearly. And I think it's those expectations that you'll just come up and say something super profound and stuff, and it'll be like amazing when you're speaking in public and you're preaching and stuff. But sometimes you don't even know how to explain yourself or how to express yourself, because it
Yeah.
only makes sense to you. And then also for me, growing up, people used to call me antisocial in my own family. Like my parents used to call me antisocial, and they didn't realize that that was kind of like they were kind of restraining me in that sense, where I felt like it wasn't that I was antisocial, it was just that I was a bit shy, and I was a bit like anxious. I used to face a lot more of social anxiety when I was younger, and I still face it now, but I've done better at trying to handle that. But when people call introverts antisocial or loners or even quiet, that's one thing that I hate being called, because I am not quiet, when
Yeah.
people call me quiet, or when people call other people quiet, like if you're in a room of five people and one person is not really speaking much, and you say, oh, you're so quiet, you don't realize how that might make someone feel. Because when you say to someone, oh, you're being so quiet, that makes them feel like I'm boring. And that's how I felt it, when people would say, you're so quiet, why aren't you talking and stuff. It made me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so boring, and I have no value to add to this conversation. I'm just like, I'm just a wallflower, I'm just watching everyone. So when people
Mm.
say you're too loud or too extroverted, or on the other extreme, you're too quiet and you're too this, it's like, it can be something that's really hurtful.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, sorry to like the word too loud like just triggered something in me. I remember when I was about like 16, 17, like just kind of like on the verge of becoming an adult, and I was really excited about it and stuff. And I was in this church youth meeting, and they were like, you're going to become an adult soon, and soon you'll get married and all of the stuff. So you need to be careful about being too loud because you're a woman. You need to be careful about being too loud and being too independent and being too opinionated, and like having these things, because you remember, like, you're a woman. So you've got to submit to your husband, and let them, and that you don't want to be come across as intimidating to them because you have opinions. And I was like, God, how can you say that? Like, did my mind not come from God?
Yeah.
Did, like, and has my personality not come from God? If
Mhm.
I'm not a like loud, I can't handle like parties and clubbing and all of that stuff. But I'm like, hello, how are you? No, that's not who I am. Like, God gave me this voice, you know and God given me opinions, and God is speaking to me in the sense of, like, revelations while I'm reading my Bible. Why do I not get to be able to express my own convictions? And honestly, I don't think I even broke free of that until I met my husband, where he was like, that's a load of crap. Like, I want to hear what you have to say. And, like, he gave me that space, because I was always so fearful that I would have to be less in order to be a good wife. And he was like, go, if you want to be a CEO, go be a CEO. Like, I'm not going to stop you. And if you want to be the president of a country, like, go be a president. And why should, just because you're a woman, you can't, I don't know, you have to be less successful than your husband because it's intimidating? No, not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I can understand that because like as men, I feel like they can get away with so many things from their personality, whereas women can't. Like I've seen it even in, like corporate settings about how men can be dominating and assertive and authoritative and
Yeah,
controlling sometimes, and they get away with it because it's like, oh, it's just male ego, it's just men, it's how they are. But if a woman does exactly the same thing, and I've seen this happen, they'll be like, oh, she's such a bitch, she's so like, who does she think she is, how can she boss me around, how can she
yeah,
speak like this, how can she be so authoritative, how can she be so bossy, like men love to call women bossy.
yeah,
But you know what, we have a right to sometimes boss people around, especially if they don't know what they're doing. And the label of bossy in itself can be so, like, it can be something that makes women feel so bad because
yeah,
it's just they're just taking charge, it's just taking authority of what they're supposed to. I mean, honestly, if
exactly.
you're someone who knows your stuff, like let's say you're a CEO, why shouldn't you be bossy? Why should you always be timid and quiet and stuff all the time? Like it's not something that we need to worry about. So now we've talked a little bit about how this has affected us in the adult life, corporate settings. We've talked about our teenage experience. I want to kind of backtrack a little bit and I just wanted, because you're a mother, so if you could just tell us, like, from a childhood perspective, like often people tend to call children either like, a friendly or a good baby or something like that. I myself am guilty of doing that. I'll see a baby and I'm like, oh, you're so friendly, you're so sweet, you're such a good baby because it's like, well behaved and not crying and stuff for a few hours and stuff. And you, I know, Joe, as a mother, have experienced people like labeling your child. So can you just talk a little bit about how these labels have kind of impacted your child and how you view these labels as a mother?
Gosh, I like, literally, I am ready for battle whenever there's like, I'm taking my child into any social setting, because every time, and I mean it, like, even with family, whether it's church, whether it's anywhere, every time we go into a social setting, a label will be passed on to my child, to my daughter. And I have it, literally, it makes my blood boil. So Thea, my daughter, as you know, she was born in COVID. And so firstly, she was like labeled a COVID baby. So, and the connotation with COVID babies is that, oh, they're not going to be like so people friendly, and they're going to be afraid of people and stuff like that. That was the connotation, like, oh, COVID babies, they're going to struggle with their people skills, their social skills. Now, Thea was not exposed for almost 1.5 years of her life to crowds. Okay, so she doesn't necessarily cope well in large settings. She is not an unfriendly child. Okay, she when she knows you and when she becomes comfortable with you, she will shower you with affection, and she will snuggle, and she will really, I mean, she would really like just shower her love on you. She's a very affectionate little girl, but she doesn't she chooses whom she feels safe and comfortable, and whom she wants to be that way with. Now, does that make her an unfriendly child? Not by any means. It just means that she clicks with some and she doesn't click with others. And I think we, even as adults, we can't just walk into a room full of 50 people and be like, hey, you're my best friend, to all 50 of them. We click with some and we don't click with others. So she's been labeled shy. She's been labeled unfriendly. She's been labeled moody. And the thing is, children, especially at her age, she's 3, they go through so much, right? Like if they've not had a good night's sleep, or if they've not eaten well, or if their stomach is aching, they've like, there's so many things that they're going through in their little bodies that don't allow them to necessarily cope with the social settings. I mean, if I'm tired and I have to drag myself to church, I'm not necessarily going to be my best self. But she's being picked up from her sleep, dressed up. I'm like, hello, going to church. And she's like, I was sleeping. You know what I mean? And she has to go and smile and like let people carry her and stuff. Like, how is that fair? Why can't she just be allowed to express her own self by just being like, I want my mom or I want my dad? And why is that wrong? Because we are a source of comfort and safety for them, right? In that setting. So I think I I resent, absolutely resent, and I will not tolerate somebody calling my daughter shy, because she might be choosy, and she's not the loudest person in the room, but she's not shy. She does have her opinions, she will express it, but you need to create a space for her to feel like she can. And if you haven't done that, then that's not on her, that's on you. And so that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's honestly that I can understand how that can be so damaging for a child, especially like children. You never know what a child is going to remember or take with them for the rest of their life. So, just
Yeah.
in closing, I just wanted to ask, like, how do you think we can break free of the downward spiral and effects that labels have on us?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think coming to Christ was the turning point for me, and is still the turning point for me, because I don't think that there is any other way to, like, because there is so much of damage that comes from all of these things. So I think that is number one. Number two is I did have to seek help, like professional help, to help me process or even comprehend maybe some of the I'm losing my word, like not the downfall, the consequence of what I've faced, to even because I didn't even realize. And number three is, I think, having one or two people, confidants, whom you can really talk to and be transparent with, and like even maybe have meltdowns and breakdowns with. And that might not necessarily be your significant other, because sometimes they don't necessarily have the tools or the ability to get it, especially like because of being a different gender, we experience things differently. So having a same gender confidant to kind of, who can really help you and guide you and not give in to your self-pity also, or your self-loathing, in a sense. I don't know, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree that having like the right sources like therapy and counseling and stuff, mentors, people who can really speak life into you, but also like it helps to have people who really know you and your strengths, so that when you have those times of feeling weak or unaccomplished or even stupid, people can just really speak life into you. Like you, just as labels have the power to damage your life, labels can also have the power to uplift you, and words really have that impact. And I think that's the main
Yes.
takeaway from this conversation, that words really have impact. So if you're listening to this and you feel like convicted and you feel like maybe words are something I really need to consider before I just say something to other people, that would be my takeaway to all of you who are listening and to myself as well. It's a learning that all of us have to consider. And a practical one also, just to give some advice, is just, like talk to yourself. You don't always have to listen to your thoughts and what they're telling you. Your thoughts might be saying, you're too stupid, look at you, you messed up, you did this. And as Christians, we believe that that comes from the devil. But even if you're someone who doesn't really believe that, you just, people have negative thoughts sometimes, people have like we're always like super critical of our own self. We are our worst enemies. So just remember to talk to yourself. Remember to speak to yourself as though you are like a child, and don't be so hard on yourself. Like just as you would be kind to a child, consider yourself a child. So if you're making a mistake, be like, oh, I made a mistake, but I'll do better. Like how you speak to a child, speak to yourself with the same grace and the same patience and the same the same kind of understanding as well. That would be my main takeaway to all of you. That's all the time that we have for today. But I just wanted to thank you so much, Jo, for sharing your story, your journey, and for sharing your insight into this amazing topic. I'm sure we have a lots more to talk about it and could go on for longer, but that's all the time that we have for today. If you have been enjoying this podcast, please do follow us on social media at The Daily Deck. And don't forget to like this podcast and rate it on Spotify if you've been enjoying us. And also reach out to us and tell us what you've been liking about our podcast and what you want to hear about. We want to hear from you. So that's it for today, and we will see you next time.